Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. Here we go.
Well, I started getting more serious about wrestling in 5th grade. I quit football. I started getting really serious in like 7th, 8th grade about wrestling. And you know what? I don't know if it was like a thing. I think it just like I said, I'm obsessive. And so I just started working out every day. And then it was like, okay, I work out every day. It's like, and I didn't see any reason not to keep working out every day. I enjoyed working out for the most part. So I just kept going. And then it was like, I don't know. At some point, I realized it was highly abnormal that most people don't train every single day.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Welcome back to the show, ladies and gents. This is your host, Ryan Warner. You're listening to Wrestling Changed My Life. My guest today is none other than the funky one, Ben Askren. This was recorded about 2 months ago. And if you don't know this man, this introduction's not going to help you. So let's get right to the interview. Fan of the week goes to Connor and Tanner. Their pops got them turned on to the show. They're listening, and we appreciate it, boys. Thank you very much. Last but not least, this episode is brought to you by Competitor Supreme, which is a Dan Gable movie from the 90s. When I was a kid, I watched this thing over and over and over, and I couldn't find it online. But now you can stream it on WrestlingChangeMyLife.com. Just go to WrestlingChangeMyLife.com and click on the tab Competitor Supreme and use the promo code GABLE, G-A-B-L-E, for a free rental. It's normally $2, but if you use the promo code GABLE, G-A-B-L-E, you'll get a free rental. Let's give it up for Ben, the funky one, Askren. Peace! Ben Askren, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You're well known in the wrestling, fighting, podcast, crypto circuits, and I thought
so many circuits,
so many disc golf. I haven't heard a lot about that lately. Are you
go.
still gung ho about disc golf?
Yeah, I have 15 holes on my property. I intend to finish. I think I'll have 21 when I'm finished on my land here. And yes, I don't obviously have the time to go play in tournaments or anything actively, but I do spend quite a bit of time out playing disc golf.
Was there a time when you did tournaments?
Oh yeah, I took second at the amateur nationals. I took ninth at the amateur worlds twice. I had a 996 rating, and it was at my peak, and a rating of 1,000 as a world class professional. So I got really close to being a world class professional. I didn't quite get there, and then other things took over my life.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, across all the different things you're doing, I could see where time is tight. And one of the things, when doing some research on you, I didn't see a ton of stuff around some of your international career. And I know
it wasn't very long, right? I probably did 6, 7 tournaments, something like that. So, it wasn't very long.
Yeah, you did a shitload in October, November of 2007. Like Sun Kiss, the Tournament Canada.
Yep.
NYC.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and then obviously, in addition to that, at that point, I mean, really, it's just getting to the point now where, we watched Matteo Pellicone on Flow a couple weeks ago where that content is actually being broadcast. But, I mean, back then, not only was it not broadcast live, but you probably couldn't find results, let alone watch matches from it, unfortunately.
Yeah, just before we get into that, I was listening to an interview you did with Jason Bryant in 2015, and you guys were talking about how there was a low turnout at the World Trials in Madison or something. I don't know.
No, it was terrible.
Terrible. How far has wrestling come in just 5 years? It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's came so far, and I think that's I think I think it's best evidenced by the two things last year. So number one, the Ringer Dake, and then number two, Yanni Zane. I mean, in the middle of Texas in what was it, June or something, or I don't know, it was one of the summer months. I don't recall which one. I'm blanking. But it might have been August. Who knows? They put 2,000 people in a gym in Texas, right? And then a couple weeks later in Pennsylvania, there was 2,000 fans showed up for one match. One match. That's it's like it's so fantastic. And so wrestling is finally understanding and learning how to market itself. It's going really well, and I love that.
How much of it is social media and getting some real proficiency there versus, I mean, Flow's been around even back in 2015 when we had those issues of turnout. So what's kind of the turning point for you?
Well, I mean, I think really if Flow helps immensely, right? But from an international basis, it was not really widely broadcast. I mean, still we can't watch all the tournaments, right? We couldn't watch the Euregan, which is one of the top tournaments. We couldn't watch that. That was just 2 weeks ago. So it's not like we can watch everything yet. It's getting better. But from a collegiate standpoint, we can now view almost everything, right? And I think everything helps everything else. And so when I'm able to flip on my phone and watch a few matches on Friday night, I'm more likely to be interested to then go watch a dual meet somewhere. I'm then more interested to be likely to go watch an NCAA tournament. If I end up going to an NCAA, then I'm more likely to get interested and watch a match on Flow the next year, right? So I think everything helps itself. And, I've been touring, doing camps since probably 2003. And I remember, say, in my era, 2007, if I mentioned a big name, nobody knew who that was. I mean, maybe just like the top one or two, right? Like literally one or two people. And now it's like I can walk into my club. I'm going to my club to coach practice tonight. And if I say a match from last weekend, if I say RBY DeSanto, they'll know. If I say Cameron Michael Hall, Mark Hall, they'll know. Like they know. Kids are watching. People are paying attention because of the access we have to it.
Yeah. So it's access, and it's also, I mean, to your point though, Flow, even when it was background, it took a while for them to get the rights. So now that they have the rights to all of the matches, I mean, you've never seen more Division I college wrestling. And I know for you, when you talk about some of those pivotal moments of your kids watching high level guys, for you it was the 2000 Olympic trials. How old were you when you went to that, and what was so impactful about that event for you? Let's see. What was so? Well, I was all the way into wrestling. I quit my freshman year. I quit football to wrestle all year round. And I was just getting into wrestling on a really deep level. There was a camp alongside it, and I convinced my parents to send me. I went by myself, and I don't know. I watched those guys, and I said, "F that! I'm gonna make an Olympic team." And I realized 2004 would probably be too soon. I said 2008 was probably the right time. And by 2000, had you already started doing the thing where you're working out? You had a pleasure workout every single day?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of an obsessive personality type.
When did that start for you?
To see. Well, I started getting more serious about wrestling in 5th grade. I quit football. I started getting really serious in like 7th, 8th grade about wrestling. And you know what? I don't know if it was like a thing. I think it just like I said, I'm obsessive. And so I just started working out every day. And then it was like, okay, I work out every day. It's like, and I didn't see any reason not to keep working out every day. I enjoyed working out for the most part. So I just kept going. And then it was like, I don't know. At some point I realized it was highly abnormal that most people don't train every single day. So then I realized it was working to my advantage because if I trained every day and other people didn't train every day, then I could win more. So I figured I might as well just keep going.
And what did training mean for you back in those days? Was it working out in your basement alone? Was it running? What was it?
I hate running, so it was probably minimal amount of running. I love wrestling, so it was a lot of wrestling, and obviously it was difficult in those days because there weren't wrestling clubs that went year round. I mean, there was a spring club by me that went, I think, March, April, May for twice a week or something, and so it was like going to recruit other people to come train with me in my basement and finding the right people, and that was kind of what it meant.
Had the Steiners made the move to Wisconsin yet?
They started their club. They were there, but they started their club, I believe, my senior year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was a member of that club I'm actually now, my brother and I just are buying that club, and we're starting operations in April. So came for full circle.
Yeah, are those the 2 locations you're opening up this spring here?
That's one of them. So obviously we're not kind of starting from scratch, but we are buying that facility and kind of turning it into one of our own, and then we are opening a new facility south of Milwaukee in the town called Franklin.
Got it. Man, you guys are growing like crazy. I mean, are there other academies in Wisconsin? Because like in Chicago, you have Overtime, Izzy Style, Poetas.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple clubs in the Milwaukee area. There was 2 when we got here. They've kind of condensed into one club. There's one still that operates in Green Bay, or kind of 2 that they're all right. And then I guess the other big one would be a guy named who I went to high school with and friends with, Crass. He has kind of 3 facilities up in the northwest part of the state. They do a good job.
What is it about your philosophy, or I guess I guess it would be your philosophy that's unique? Because I've seen on your website you have something called the Pillars program. I don't know if that's something that's detailed and structured, that you have a plan for 7th or high school, or
yeah. So if I had to condense it all down to, it's just that, okay, number 1, we actually really love wrestling, and number 2, we try to do what's best for the kids. And most people want success early, and I think that happens to have a lot of negative impacts, and we can be patient with it. And we know if we just continue with our process over the course of time, we're not going to push kids early. We're not going to make them cut weight. We're not going to make them train hard when they're young. They will have success long term. And so our retention rates are really high. We don't see a lot of burnout. I mean, I remember one time, Ryan, I was in Chicago, and this is kind of this anecdote will kind of go across a lot of the community. But we're at this tournament, and there's one division that's 10 and under, and there's one division that's 14 and under, right? And there's this one team that has a team in the 10 and under, but does not have a team in the 14 and under. And I remember the coach saying, "Yeah, we got 46 kids in our club, and only 3 of them are above the age of 10." And me thinking like, "Holy crap, you idiot! Don't you realize that means you're burning them all out by the time they're 11?" Like, duh! Like, is that not such a duh thing? Like, I would say our kids, we have way more 7th and 8th graders than we do younger, because once we get them in our room, they stick around, and then more and more show up as they get older. So I think that's kind of a huge one that most people miss on. They try training their kids, try to make them too good too early, put too much emphasis on the early success, and that leads to a lot of problems. And we just keep kids around. If I know if I just keep kids coming back over and over and over again, they are going to, in fact, get good over the course of time. I don't need to force it by the time they're in 5th or 6th grade.
And when do you think it's okay for a kid to, you hear this all the time, to focus on one sport exclusively, assuming it's driven by the kid, not the parent?
Yeah. I think my take on kids is that sometime between age 11 and 14, and every kid's different based on their emotional maturity, the kid can start making choices on what they want to do with their life. For me, it was age 11. I decided I wanted to quit baseball. My parents let me do it. At age 14, I decided I want to quit football. And so you kind of see kids in that. Before that, they're very heavily influenced by what's around them, right? Whether it's older kids or parents or coaches, they're really, really heavily influenced. I think at that age 11 to 14, somewhere in there, they start getting like a voice of their own and really be able to start speaking about, what they want to do with their life. And so, I've also actually been heavily influenced by this book, Range, by David Epstein lately. And so I never push kids to quit wrestling or quit other sports in lieu of wrestling. And so I always try to kind of stay out of decisions. I don't want to be the one that makes a decision or push the kids in a decision. And now I think I'll even further stay out of that discussion.
Yeah, that's, unless it's coming from the kid, it could be kind of tricky, because parents are using kids like currency almost now, either amongst their own social circles or because they think they're going to get some kind of scholarship or whatever. It's kind of weird. And I don't think it's specific to wrestling either.
I don't think obviously it's the world I'm in, but no, I do some work with this guy, Nick, who's got this thing called Reformed Sports Parent. I don't know if you've seen him posting on Facebook, but it's crazy the amount of likes and shares that a lot of his memes get. And I think it's because there's so much frustration built up around the way that youth sports are. I mean, dude, his posts like regularly get 2,000 shares. And I know you're on Facebook. Getting 2,000 shares is so freaking abnormal. I mean, it doesn't happen. So obviously the things that he's putting up there and the things that he's saying are resonating heavily with the people reading it.
100%. I was actually going to ask you, is that like your company behind the scenes? Because you're featured in a ton of that shit.
Yeah, it's not my company. I kind of like just started talking to the guy kind of early, or when he was just starting, and it's like, he's really sharp, and it's a topic I'm really passionate about. And it's something like, if I had enough time, I would go do all the shit he's doing, but I don't have time. So the fact that he's doing it so well, and he's kind of like, him and I are really operating on the same wavelength. So it's obviously I share a lot of stuff he does because I agree wholeheartedly with it.
Well, I mean, obviously there's a market for it because the traction it gets there, but
it's super hard to find the market because here's the thing, and this is what I told him. It's like, I support your message and motive. I don't know how you're ever going to make money off of it because everything that you're doing is taking money away from other people. If you're saying little kids don't go to national tournaments because they're worthless, that's taking money out of those tournament directors' pockets, right? So there's not really a monetary incentive to do so, whereas the tournament director has a monetary incentive to get kids to go to his tournament, to make them think the trophy's really cool, or it'll be really important, or it's going to help him somehow if he wins, right? Same thing with clubs, right? I mean, club coaches have huge incentive to push kids early, to make them do more privates, to do et cetera, to make more money. And so to say, oh, that coach, he's full of crap, that, again, is a negative financial thing. So I don't know how he's going to make money off it. I do wholeheartedly agree with his mission statement, but I think it is kind of a hard thing because he's taking money out of other people's pockets and saying, hey, listen, just let your effing kid go play in the backyard. That's probably going to be just as beneficial to them as going to something else. Like, that is a really hard sell for parents. The other thing is, most parents aren't super educated in this type of thing. And so, listen, if I train if you give me, say, Ben, I want you to do this. I want you to go take every 7-year-old you're in club, which our 7-year-olds right now, we only practice 1 day a week for an hour. And that's it. It's very low key. Instead of doing that, I want you to train them really hard 3 times a week. Listen, those 7-year-olds are going to get pretty good pretty fast, right? But I think it's a long-term negative towards most of, right? Some of them will be fine and benefit long-term. The majority of them will say, this sucks, I don't like it, I quit. Okay? And so when you see a kid, an uneducated parent sees a coach pushing a kid young, and they have a handful of, I'll say it, that Gomez Wrestling Club. That was in Chicago.
Oh, I know those guys, yeah.
They always had a bunch of killer little 8, 9, 10-year-olds, and then where were they when they got to high school? I didn't see them then, right? And so, but an uneducated parent will say, wow, I want my 7-year-old to be a state champ. I'm going to send him there, right? Because they don't see the long-term progression and what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think the thing you said is uneducated parents. Most of the guys who were competitive at something at some high level like yourself or any Division I parent, they seem to have it understood, but that's not the majority of kids wrestling.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Maybe your buddy can like camp outside your facility and do like a coach's practice while the kids are in there practicing.
I hope his message gets really distributed from to a wide basis because he has a point, and I think there are more and more people coming along these lines that see the damage it's doing. And actually, what it really is it's a psychological epidemic where it's really having negative impact on kids at a young age because what they're doing, they're tying their results in athletics to their self-worth, and parents are enabling that behavior. And so I think that will become a really big talking point of this.
Yeah, and that's something where, you've been involved with sports psychology for a long time.
Yes.
And so this is all relevant to you just based on what you've studied in college. When did you conduct the study of former NCAA champs?
That was 2006-07 we tried. So I got, I think, 120 responses at that point. We wrote a book, a lady named her name is Renee Mapes. She's a PhD in sports psych, and it just wasn't that great, so we didn't ever put it out.
What were some of the findings? It's pretty cool to hear from 125 NCAA champs. Was there anything that really jumped out?
Let's see. Well, the number one was this, and it wasn't even something we intended to gather. We asked the question, when did you go from good to great? Because I always think there's a turning point at some point in people's lives where they, it's either they fully start believing themselves or maybe they start getting coached by someone who gets them to believe in themselves, right? There's something that enables them to go from where they are to further. I think you can kind of see that inflection point in a lot of people's careers. Some people it's earlier than later, right? I was kind of looking for something around that inflection point. And what I got back was a whole bunch of people who said, I was never great. This question assumed I was great. This guy was great, but I was never great. And so you have all of these NCAA champions, which, obviously greatness can't really be quantified, but if you want to take NCAA champions, we're talking about the top 0.001%. So if you do quantify greatness, these people all have to be included for sure, right? And they're all saying, I am not great, when in fact they actually are great. And what that made me think of was that these people never viewed themselves in that light, and I think that's really important. And so I tied that into like a beginner's mind philosophy. Well, once kids get to that point where they think, I'm good enough, I know everything, I don't have to get any better, then they go from here and they start going here or possibly here. Whereas there's people who never thought they were great when they're really great. And at that point, 2006, it's like, well, I guess, okay, well, if I'm going to apply that standard to these people, I'm great because I've won an NCAA title and now going on 2. But I never thought of myself that way. I just thought, hey, I'm going to go in and I'm going to get better and I'm going to keep trying to get better. And that's all I really ever thought about. So I think that's like probably the thing that was the most interesting that I didn't really anticipate. I guess the other thing, and I won't out this person, there was obviously a heavy amount of self-belief, which you would think that you would find within a group of NCAA champions. But what I came to believe or realize from this is this belief doesn't always have to be equated to reality. And so what I mean by that is I'm going to give you 2 examples. There was 2 people, both NCAA champions. One of them said, I trained year-round because that's what I had to do to be an NCAA champion. The other one said, I had to take 2 months off because I needed my mind to have the break to be an NCAA champion, right? So we're dealing with 2 statements, which are both reality. They both did become NCAA champions, which both their training habits differed, right? One said, I had to train year-round. The other said, I had to take the time off. Okay, and then, so finally, and I was really struggling with that. And then I get this one from this guy who's an NCAA champion. And again, I'm not going to tell you who it was, but I can tell you I knew the guy fairly well, and I know he's full of crap. He said, I was the most athletic guy in my weight class, and that was why I won an NCAA champion. I'm like, bro, you are not athletic. Come on. You're full of crap. And so, but damn if he didn't write it, and he believed it. And then, when I thought about the guy, I'm like, as crazy as it seems, this dude believes what he's writing right now. And that was what led me to, it's like, okay, some of this self-belief is not tied into reality, which then led me to okay, now I'm going off. Your thesis on Dan Gable. One of the reasons Dan Gable was so great at what he did is he was able to get all of these guys to believe that their conditioning was better than everyone else's, and that was why they were going to win. And here's you want to know what the fantastic thing about this is, Ryan?
Hit me.
You can't disprove that statement. You can't disprove it. You cannot quantify at the end of 7 minutes and say, he is 72% tired and you're only 68% tired. You're in better shape than he is, right? The Iowa guy's tired as shit. He comes over to the sideline. Gable says, look at the other guy. He's more tired than you are. And the other guy goes, damn straight he is. Right? It's an unquantifiable thing. And therefore you can never disprove it.
Right.
Okay, unless the guy gets so tired he falls over, which because they're in pretty good shape, that never happens. It may happen to a few other guys. And then obviously you probably prop that one example up as other people getting tired. But it is very, very difficult to disprove the sentiment that you are less tired or more tired than the other person at the end of 7 minutes.
And think about the impact that had on youth wrestling for years and years and years.
I hate it. I actually hate it.
So let's get to something I know you're passionate about. Obviously, everyone in wrestling is a fan of Cael Sanderson for what he's done.
Yes.
Is he too Bill Belichick-like? Is he too...
Well, I mean, it's just to what you mentioned. I wish that Cael would have more influence because of the amount of influence Gable had.
Right.
Gable had every coach wanting to grind their kids into the ground, and it's like, you don't need to do that at 7 years old or 8 years old or 9 years old or 10 years old, right?
Right.
Maybe at 12, 13, 14. And the other thing is, if you take a kid who's never ever wrestled, first day, he has no vested interest in the sport of wrestling whatsoever, and you grind him, and he thinks, shit, that sucked. I'm not coming back tomorrow, right? Or maybe you do it after a month. I'm not coming back. Now you put this kid in this 2 or 3 or 4 years, and he has a vested interest, and he likes wrestling, and he's been doing, and you make him do something that he doesn't like or that's really tough, and he's gonna say, listen, he has something now invested into the sport, which is going to, when things get to that point, because, it's like when you push a kid past the point that he's been before, they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
They never do. Right. And nor do you. If I went and push you with something you've never done, you're not going to like it.
Fair.
But if you have a tie to it, if there's something that you've invested, you're much less likely to give up. And so when coaches try to push these kids right away, it's the dumbest thing that they can do because that kid has nothing invested. And so, when we talk about our system, I am going to ask some of these 8th graders and high school kids to grind it out. I am going to ask them to cut some weight sometimes. I am going to ask them to do stuff that is difficult and tough, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But by the time I'm asking them to do that, they're well invested in the sport and they know they want to be good at it. And so most of the time, not every time, most of the time, they're going to follow through because of the investment that they already have.
So you're saying there's a balance between when you weave that into the training and not. Because obviously that Gable style worked. I mean, I had Mark Ironside on last week. He beat Colat, and you think Colat way more technical, but just for whatever reason, that style was able to grind him down in that match in that All-Star meet in 96.
Well, yeah. Conditioning is a weapon, obviously, right? Conditioning can be a factor. Now in wrestling, because people understand. I mean, when Gable was doing that, obviously training methods weren't nearly as up to date as they are today. Right. Now you don't see a lot of conditioning. Doesn't win a lot. It doesn't win matches, sure, right? Does it win the amount of matches it did 30 years ago? And the answer to that's no. And that's why the next evolution was Kale and what he's doing with technique. And you see guys. I mean, if the 5 guys who had who were probably all timers: Taylor, Ruth, Nickel, Zane, and Nolf. All 5 of those guys are probably all-time type guys, whatever way you want to qualify it, whether it was by NCAA titles, points scored at the NCAA tournament, however you want to qualify it. Could those guys win matches by conditioning? Yes, they could, right? Did they win a lot of matches by conditioning? The answer to that is no, right? They won a lot of matches because they were just better wrestlers than the other person. And so I think that's really, in 2019, you can't win a lot of matches just by wearing people out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's more fun to watch the other style. Like those guys, like I kind of think of them as, I'm an Iowa fan, so I kind of think of them as Iowa style wrestlers. They're scoring all the time. Granted, they also have the element of scrambling added into it.
Well, it's the element. I mean, scrambling to me isn't something different, right? It's just wrestling. So what those guys have the ability to is wrestle at all times. Whereas if you have a guy who can't scramble, he always gets to that point where he has to stop, right? Okay, I can't go past here because either I'm scared of it or I don't know what I'm doing. When you're comfortable everywhere, like you think of any of those other guys I named, they're comfortable everywhere. They'll just keep wrestling. So they have the ability to wrestle from any position for all 7 minutes.
Yeah, no question about it. And one of the things I want to ask you with respect to scrambling or funk or whatever you call it. I mean, Mike Ironman calls it wrestling. Looks like wrestling to me. You talk about in the Flow documentary how your senior year you were very deep with this shit, like 8-9 level, 8-9 moves in advance. Do you think anyone has gotten to that level of proficiency since then, or has it been far surpassed?
Oh, that's a good question. So that level meaning that far past everyone else in that thing, or that level meaning that's where
that level of mastery with that particular skill set of wrestling that was so unique to you. Has anyone gotten to that level since?
Yeah. So I think it's far more pervasive, right? A lot of people do it. And I think there's been absolutely some of the Penn State guys have made evolutions on some of the things that I did. But what still does blow me away is the amount of people who still I just brought one up last week. Mikey Labriola loses to Michael Kemmerer on a leg pass, and then Mikey Labriola beats Caleb Romero on a leg pass. Like the fact that those guys on the shooting side, which was Michael Labriola in one case and Caleb Romero on the other side, don't understand the simple defense to a leg pass is mind-blowing. They lost matches because that's simple shit. That's scrambling, maybe not 101, but we'll say 102. It's definitely not higher level scrambling. And so, yes, there are people that are at that level, but the amount of people who still don't understand the basics kind of blows me away.
Like what level of wrestler would know that at your club? Is that middle school or is that high school shit or is that elementary?
Oh, no. So Max and I actually argue about this one a lot. I tend to not teach too much scrambling till older, when they're older, high school age. At the younger ages, I think you have to build the pyramid, right? So the pyramid goes like this, and I think scrambling's up here.
Okay.
So I don't think you build this part till you build the foundations. And Max would disagree with that. Max would start teaching some of the stuff early on. And so, yeah, it's obviously, we grew up in the same systems all the way through, and it's a point that we still kind of differ on. So, there's multiple ways to skin a cat. There's obviously some people who win national titles who still don't scramble at all. So it is obviously possible. So I would start teaching that stuff a little bit later on. I don't really actually think the leg pass is that good of a scramble. I think it's kind of like the worst of all of the scrambles, in my opinion.
Really? Why is that?
It's easily defended. You can't score more than 2 points off of it, generally speaking. I just think there's much better options if you know what you're doing.
So if someone went to the Askren Academy, one went to your brothers, one went to yours, are they on the same plan and progression over like a multi-year period, or is it like how much cohesion is there?
There's I would say like 80 to 90% the same, and then there's those areas that we differ on, right? And it's going to be like he's going to teach some of this stuff when they're in 5th or 6th grade. And I'm going to teach that same thing a little bit later on. I might spend a few more minutes on down block go behinds or sprawling at a younger age, where he goes to a far ankle. And so, under the roof, there's all the same stuff. It's just like when you teach it, maybe it's not exactly at the same time type of stuff.
Okay. Now, before we get back to your competitive career, I do want to hit on one thing. If you were a Division I head coach, I know you interviewed for the Wisconsin job. Obviously, you're 18th qualified to do so. What is like 2 or 3 things you're seeing now that really bother you or that you would change if you were a D1 coach of a top 10 program?
So I don't think I'll ever be a Division I coach again. The only places I would ever even slightly consider would be Wisconsin or Missouri. Now that I have 3 kids and my mom lives down the street, I just don't think I would ever make the move. Plus, I really love the AWA stuff. I'm having a lot of success. I know if you flip me, if you just said you kidnapped me, you put me in the thing and made me coach in Missouri, I'm sure I would love that too.
Yeah.
Right? I get that. Nevertheless, the roots are growing here. It would be hard for me to move. I think, and this is a little bit of a blind stab because I don't know exactly what Cale's doing. I think I have a good feel for what Cale's doing, even though he won't come out and talk about it. So I think I would spend a lot of time sparring and drilling because, hard work only gets you so far. You can only be so good a shape. And I think, when we talk about those guys I mentioned from Penn State earlier, one of the reasons they got to be so much better is because they can wrestle in all positions. So I would get kids comfortable and confident in a lot of those scramble positions because there's just no way to avoid the scrambling. I mean, you can kind of beat it sometimes, but, when you talk about the team who's most against Iowa, Kemmerer, he can scramble pretty damn well.
Right.
Spencer Lee, he can scramble pretty well. Even DeSantos had some pretty good scrambles against Seth Gross this year. So, you can only deny that scrambling is a necessary part of wrestling for so long, and then at some point you just have to embrace it. So I would get guys really comfortable and really proficient within those situations. I think that's a huge one that some people are missing on.
What about open tournaments at the beginning of the year? Are you doing more of the invitational style, or are you going to keep rolling with the opens?
Yeah, I would have to. Obviously, I've never been forced to it. I would have to test it out for myself. I think I would run a few different simulations over the course of a few years, iterations, right, seeing what works. I don't really love that people are doing so few matches. I feel like everyone's getting like 25 to 30 matches. Something about it says that's just not the right way to go about it for me. Maybe for some people it is. And so I would have to kind of study that, right? Study my team under 40 matches, see how they do. Study my team when we travel, see how they do. Maybe I wouldn't travel so much. I think there's a bunch of different ways to kind of look at it. And I don't want to comment because I haven't done it. And one of the things that drives me crazy in life is people who talk about something before they've done it, right? There's a lot of these idiots on Instagram and Facebook. They say, I'm an expert at this. And it's like, well, what are your qualifications? Well, yeah, you have done. So shut up.
Right.
And so, without actually going through the process of running a college wrestling team, I kind of have guesses on what I would do with the schedule, but I don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, but you've been a coach, though. It's not like you have.
I have, yeah.
At Arizona State.
Yeah. I mean, but part of the argument, with today's guys, they need less matches because they've had more matches when they're younger, and they're more ready to compete. And so I do think, in fact, that competition in itself is a skill. I absolutely think that. I hold that to be true. So it's like, okay, maybe I got one guy who's a great competitor who doesn't need 40 matches, who he just shows up every single time. He's got his process down. But maybe I have a couple of freshmen who don't have that process down, who panic in the big matches, who don't understand how to compete really. So maybe they do need 40 matches, and maybe they need critiqued in and out of matches, and they need that practice. So, again, without kind of going through that process to figure out what's better, it's hard to comment because there is not a great consensus on what is correct and what's false.
So do you think people have moved away from that national duels tournament because of wear and tear, or just because I don't even know why they went away from it? I used to love that tournament, and I remember the year you're supposed to wrestle Mark Perry there. That didn't happen. But would you do the duels?
In my ideal scenario, if I was in charge, I'd have a double national championship. I'd have one part dual season and one part tournament season.
Let's go.
I think that would be so much fun. I think we'd see more moving around, jockeying of lineups because of the, weight certification rules wouldn't be that necessary because the tournaments weren't in place. So I think that would probably be the ideal scenario for wrestling. I mean, obviously the NCAA tournament is awesome as it gets, but then when you see a duel like on Friday night, and really there's many teams who are doing a great job at filling up their duel mates in 2019, 2020. So I think the duel thing would be a lot of fun. I don't know that it's going to happen though.
And is it true that you kept that article referencing what Mark Perry said for a whole summer up until the national duels, and you guys didn't get to scrap after all? Or is that internet
I want
rumor?
to say, no. I mean, I know. It was up here. I don't know if I had a physical thing of it. And he said he could scramble me. Let's bring it then. That's what I was just talking to you about. I don't like people who talk about stuff without actually having gone and done it. Okay, you can say it. Let's go.
Right, and it never happened, right?
Well, he sat on the bench. I like Mark, so I don't want to say too many mean things.
No, not at all. I mean, when he was a freshman and came out of redshirt and won the Midlands, I was a huge fan of that guy because I'm, like I said, an Illinois guy, so Midlands was huge. So I did want to hit on, like we said, the international career a little bit. So your senior year, you wrestle at 174, and then you cut down to 163. And I've heard you talk a lot this year about how Gross, at this point, he should have already made up his mind where he's going to go. Is he going to be, a big 33, or is he going to try and make the Olympic weight and kind of slowly descend? Where were you at on that? Were you thinking that far ahead? Like, were you descending down?
I had one more year to my Olympic year. I was staying a little smaller than I had the previous years. But we also had the day before, which I think that is a game changer, right? That becomes not totally a body size issue, but a lot about a water weight cut, right? How much can you water weight cut? And then you can come back by usually the next day. And so actually the first couple times I made 74 kg, it was really hard on my body, and I struggled. I thought it would be easier than it was. Luckily that was 2007, not 2008. So then by that next fall, I'd kind of figured it out, exactly where I need to be and how I was going to do it.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, when you look at that year, you at the U.S. Open in 2007, you came out, made the semis against Heskett. We're in an absolute scrap with him. End up losing a tight one. End up getting sixth at the U.S. Open. What did you change, or as you look to the trials later that summer, and then some of those tournaments in the fall? What were some of the biggest things you changed?
Well, I took fifth at the trials. I don't think I actually wrestled the fifth place match at the U.S. Open. I could be wrong. I know I was. If I can't, I remember. I can remember where I was at. I had a freaking Donnie effing poked me in the eye and headbutted me, and then my ankle got twisted. I was all jacked up, and then the weight cut. Like I said, the weight cut was having a heavy impact on me. And so getting the weight in order was a really important thing. And then also there's a few technical changes I needed to make that allowed me to have success that next year.
And at this point in your career, I know you're working out twice a day. I've read about that. What do the workouts look like for you? Like when you're at your absolute peak of wrestling at this point?
I mean, there wasn't a lot of lifting, right? Because I had to get small for 74. So it was just like maintenance lifts, nothing very heavy. And then it was just usually one really technical practice a day. And then, maybe one time where I was going really hard every day. I didn't think that was necessary at that point in my life. I knew how to go hard. For me, it was about getting more proficient in the situations that I felt were going to help me win or lose matches.
But man, I mean, you made some crazy jumps just in that short a time. I guess if you look at the results, sixth is a little misleading if you injury defaulted for fifth. But still, it's like even at the Sunkissed Kids tournament, you got fourth there, and drop 2 to guys who you'd later, I don't know if you'd wrestle Lackey again, but, Paulson was one of the guys you were battling that. I mean, you made some crazy jumps. It was
but that match was bullshit. That match, I won the first period 7-0 and I lost the last 2 1-1. I mean, think about the stupidity of that, right?
Those rules.
So yeah, those rules were terrible. But that was kind of where I made my big jump after that tournament. I think I then won the Canada one. I won the NYC, and after that I was kind of rolling. That was the last one where, I was still kind of getting the process I needed to figure it out.
Got it. Okay, and so you won the U.S. Open, and we're getting really close to the trials this year. The last thing I want to ask you about your career is, after you've won the U.S. Open and you got to bye to the finals, which it's a lot different now.
No, we didn't. We did not.
You didn't?
I did not. No. At that point, I think it was only world medalists had to bye, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I think that is the case.
So So
I wrestled. I had first round, I had Donnie. Second round, I had Ramiko, and then in the best 2-out-3 finals, I had Tyron Lewis. I was the one seed. Yes.
Okay. Now, would you say in those type of high-pressure situations, I mean, the match with Lewis, the Olympics is on the line, it's been your dream since 2000. Would you say which of the hypocritical athletes would you say you are? Would you say you're the planner or?
No, you got to be both.
Got to be both.
My argument is you need to utilize the best characteristics of both people. That's my whole argument.
And for the
most people don't understand how to do that.
So for the listeners who have no idea what we're talking about, I've listened to probably every T-Row and Funky show you've ever done. I was heartbroken when that went off air. And I love the story that you told DC about Johnny Hendricks and John Smith in a pool hall. My brother and I, we still laugh about that to this day.
It's possible.
Possibly true.
We don't know.
We
don't know for sure.
But I've heard you talk about the hypocritical athlete a lot on there. For those people who have no idea what the hell we're talking about, what is it, and what do you mean by kind of merging both sides of that?
I'm eventually going to get someone to write the book. So there's all these qualities that make someone good at something, and my beef with sports psych books is they don't correctly outline the interplay between characteristics. And so sorry, I'm pulling up my list. I have this saved on my Google Drive, so I'm gonna pull this up just so
pull it up.
I can throw a few at you. So in this case, what you would be referencing, so there's all these characteristics that balance each other, in my opinion. You're talking about the lust preparation / gunslinger. So I would say it like this: we all know that kid who he sleeps right, he eats right, he trains right, he does everything right, and that probably helps him be good. And you would say, yeah, that's true. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay. We would also say, hey, I know that guy who does everything wrong, and then somehow he just shows up and he competes really well. That is probably important to being good, right?
Yeah, just lets it rip.
Just lets it rip. A lot of people are kind of jealous of that person, right? But that's a positive mental characteristic that he proposes. Now, most people can only do one of these two things. Most gunslingers, if you make them do everything right, that will create a sense of anxiety within them, right?
Yep.
And they'll actually lose a little bit of that gunslingerness, if we want to call it. Most guys who love preparation, if they get crappy sleep the night before and the weight cut goes wrong, they will then build up anxiety. They will compete poorly. Okay? So what our ideal athlete would be, and we can do many different characteristics, but this is one of them. Someone who does every single thing right, but then when everything goes wrong, it doesn't effing matter. They just show up and scrap. And so most of the times you cannot find both those characteristics within one person, because most people lean one way or they lean the other way. And so you're balancing both sides of this, and these are two characteristics that have this significant interplay with each other, and most people don't realize how they go together.
And do you think there's a higher percentage of winners who are the planners or the gunslingers, for the ones who haven't merged yet?
I think the best of the best of the best do both,
right.
have an aspect of both. I would say probably, generally speaking, that the first one is more likely. They train right and they do everything right. A lot of those kids, a lot of the people who are in the second category exclusively, where I'm talking about older people, right? So college kids, they party a lot, they don't eat very good, and they show up. most of those kids are the ones who've been burnt as little kids, right? Who they made their train their ass off as little kids. So their skills are really good, but they lack the motivation to do everything else right because they don't want to be there anymore. I mean, one of those right now we see is, and I don't know what his early life was like, but like Joe Smith, you know, I mean, he's kind of at that point where, hell, sometimes he can show up and let it rip, and sometimes it's like, oh my God, this is a train wreck.
Right. Would you put Jacob Warner in that category too? He's not related to me. He's just such a question mark to me.
I don't know Jacob well enough to comment. I think actually just from the vibe I get, it would probably be a different category. I think he does things right. I think he really wants to be good at wrestling, and I think he's struggling to get out of his own way mentally. Meaning he likely builds things up to be more than they are, and he can't not do that. He can't figure out how to not do that, right? And so he builds up all this anxiety within himself, and anxiety is physically and mentally draining to someone, and that's what happens to him.
So do you think all that shit's coachable, or some things just inherently cannot be fixed?
I think people inherently lean certain directions, and when I say inherent, I don't mean genetics from birth. I also mean the way that you were raised as a little kid. I just talked with the Wrestling Mindset people yesterday for my Mental Monday, and his thesis was how perfectionists deal with competition. And they were talking about how when parents talk about competition and perfectionists, it's negatively correlated to performance and positively correlated with anxiety and stress.
So say it again. So it's negatively correlated with performance.
So a kid who's a perfectionist, the more his parent talks about an upcoming event, the more it affects his performance negatively. The more it makes his anxiety and stress go up, right? And anxiety and stress are negatively correlated with competition.
Right.
Okay, so the more anxiety and stress we have, the worse we compete generally.
Well, it's interesting that, I've interviewed, you're the 97th person.
Oh my goodness, why didn't you save me for 100? This is a bunch of crap.
I know, right? But most people, I can't tell you how many guys I've had on, and girls, who said their parents were indifferent to their results most of their career.
That's what you need your parent to be. That is an ideal scenario.
But why doesn't everyone, not everyone, but why do people not realize that? I mean, do they just don't know, or
they don't know, they're not educated, they don't think about it a lot, and then on top of that, lots of them probably can't control their own behavior.
That's it, self-control. Interesting.
Yeah, but a lot of it is. And so I don't want to be a dick to parents, but I've run a wrestling club for 8.5 years now. I think almost all parents want the best for their kid. Most of them just don't really know how to give it to them. Right? They're uneducated on high level performance, and that's what leads to those behaviors.
That's a good point. Yeah, I don't think any parents are out there wanting to get their kid amped up so they lose. Most people don't want that.
No, not many kids. No, not many people are trying to sabotage their kids.
No, not at all.
They'd be a real sociopath if they were.
Absolutely. Now, Ben, I do appreciate the time. I know you do podcasts all week long, so I won't keep you too long here.
Obviously, so many podcasts.
How many are you freaking doing right now?
I got
4?
Rudis, 3 wrestlings, Funky and FRB, and a Funky Crypto. So 6 actually.
Who do you do the MMA one with?
A guy named Front Row Brian.
Front Row Brian. Okay, I've not listened to that one yet, but I see the audiograms.
It's on Rockfin Network. It's a lot of fun. We don't have any sponsors. We just get on there and we talk about whatever the hell we want to talk about.
And that's a good way to wrap this down because this is going to be the first episode on Rockfin. Ben, obviously you are all things crypto just from afar. That's what I think of you as, kind of like the guy who's all in on that.
I do think it is the future, yes.
So what is Rockfin? Why are you excited about it? And why would wrestling fans have any interest in going there?
Well, there's a lot of wrestling content on Rockfin, right? And so how'd
you get involved with them?
Martin Floriani started it, right? And we've been friends forever.
Okay.
He pitched me on it, and that's kind of how I got started. So yeah, I'm welcome to the network, obviously. But I think the model he's built for compensation for creators is really nice. I think he's correctly identified a few problems with content creation and content aggregation. So what I mean by that, right, is there's content created, whether it's a wrestling match, right, and someone films it, or a podcast, or a written article, or whatever. There's content is created. Then content is then aggregated by someone, right? YouTube would be the biggest one of all content aggregators. They aggregate music, sports, everything. Once the content aggregator gets big enough, they can put undue pressure on the creators to accept less monetary compensation than is probably fair, right? Because their network has so much value, they can say, here's what you're going to, and they do this, here's what you're going to take, and you're going to like it, deal with it, okay? Additionally, the first 1,000 creators, without the first 1,000 creators, if YouTube never had a first 1,000 creators, YouTube would be worth zero. Is that fair?
Fair.
The first 1,000 creators share in none of the value of the network, okay? And so YouTube, I believe it said that $15 billion in ad revenue last year. The first 1,000 creators share none of the value of that network. Whereas in Rockfin, you get tokens. You can obviously exchange your token for $1 right away, or you can save it if you feel like the value of the network is going to go up. And so then, long term, the creators then share in the value of the network that they are building, right? YouTube didn't build that network without the creators. It was a symbiotic effort by both sides.
So there's no value to being one of the first 1,000 YouTube creators versus the millionth YouTube creator. There's no difference in value at this point in time.
Well, no, there's a lot of value, and there's a lot of value in being one of the first, right? And that's the same. Oh, yeah. So you're saying if you're on YouTube right now,
right? If you're on YouTube, yeah.
Correct. Even though number 1 or 2 or 3 or number 4 brought a lot more value to YouTube, right? Because they never get started without those first couple. But yes, now the number 1 and number 5 million get treated the exact same.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So that's what Rockfin's about. It's been around, seems like almost a year, better part of a year.
I believe it was April last year.
April of last year. And my understanding is that for a monthly subscription, you get access to all the content on there.
Everything.
Including yourself, Jordan Burroughs, folks in the Chicago area, Izzy Styles on there. So that's where this podcast will be. And I think that does it, Ben Askren. Any parting words here as we sign this?
No, that was fun. We got to talk about a lot of things that I'm passionate about, whether it's scrambling or youth wrestling coaching or psychology of performance, youth wrestling burnout. We talked about a lot of topics, so I appreciate you having me on. I hope you enjoy your time on the Rockfin Network. I think it's really, when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of it, the reason anything succeeds, scrambling included, is because it is better than whatever came before it, right? So when I said, okay, someone shoots a single log on me, I can do this or I can do that. Oh, that's better. I'm going to do that, right? And then it constantly evolves. I think Rockfin is a significant upgrade from everything that came before it.
Love it. Great way to sign off. Ben Askren, you're awesome. Thank you, sir.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Have a good day.
Take care. And all great things must come to an end. If you want to hear more from the podcast, text WRESTLE to 555-888. That's WRESTLE to 555-888. You can also find us on Instagram, Wrestling Changed My Life, Twitter, Ryan_N_Warner, as well as our website, WrestlingChangedMyLife.com. Take care, y'all. Calm. 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 Take care, y'all.